Buon pomeriggio, good afternoon everyone. We are here in this special event within Internet Festival, the 10th edition of Internet Festival, the first quantum game jam in Italy. And we are very proud to have brought this wonderful opportunity in Italy, along with Sabrina Maniscalco, Professor Sabrina Maniscalco, who's with me in this introduction. Internet Festival, for those of you who have never attended the festival, is an international occasion opportunity to talk about everything that has to do with the internet, but we will have a special guest who will tell us much more and much better about this. And it is also an interinstitutional event that involves many different actors. Here we are for the first time, as I was saying, with the Quantum Game Jam that is realized in collaboration between several universities. One is the University of Pisa, to which I belong. In particular, I'm a physicist. I'm at the Department of Physics of the University of Pisa, and then the University of Aalto, University of Turku, and the Scuola Normale Superiore, and again VIS, that is the spin-off for outreach of the Scuola Normale Superiore, and Qiskit, and Data Reply, and the National Association of Physicists, of students in physics in Italy. So we will have time to share about the content of the Quantum Game Jam, but before starting and entering in the real game, I'd like to give for a few words of introduction to Sabrina, just to introduce herself, and then we will ask our special guest, Professor Gianluigi Ferrari, who represents the University of Pisa, for his forewords. Sabrina, please.
Thank you very much, Marilu, and well, welcome also from Finland, because I'm in Finland at the moment, to this fantastic event, the Quantum Game Jam of the Internet Festival. Well, I'm a professor of physics, of quantum information and logic, and at the moment I am a professor at the University of Turku and Aalto University, as Marilu said. I'm also the vice director of the Center of Excellence for Quantum Technologies in Finland, and I'm about to move actually to the University of Helsinki, but basically, as you can probably also have guessed by my accent, I'm Italian. I'm actually Sicilian, from Mazara del Vallo, so from Sicily to Finland, and I'm very glad to be part of the organization with such a fantastic team, and I will tell you a few more words about my experience with quantum game jams later on.
Okay, thanks a lot, Sabrina. And so it's time to introduce Professor Gianluigi Ferrari. Giangi is, as every one of us calls him, is the director, first of all, of the Computer Science Department of the University of Pisa, but he's also the person responsible in charge for everything that concerns the Internet Festival for the University of Pisa. Giangi, please.
Benvenuti all'Internet Festival. Welcome to the 10th edition of the Internet Festival, and thank you for having organized this very nice event. And what is the Internet Festival? The Internet Festival is a collaboration between all the institutes in Pisa, meaning the University of Pisa, that I represent now, Scuola Normale Superiore, Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna, CNR, which is the National Center of Research in Italy, all the institute of CNR, then also the people from region Toscana, the city council, and also the industry in our environment. What is the idea of the Internet Festival? The idea of the Internet Festival is trying to have a discussion about what will be the future, the digital future of our society. So there will be a lot of events devoted to discuss both technological activities, both social entities of a digital revolution, but also we are trying to spread the idea that research and scientific research is important for our life. And we would like to make people aware of what is going on in the backstage of research. Of course, our idea was to express the basic idea of research in a popular way. So we have the people attending the Internet Festival are experts, but also are normal people walking in the street. They are interested in understanding in detail what is going on in the research side. And we are at the 10th edition, so a lot of activity has been done before, and we hope to be able to grow in the next year to attract more people and to attract more speakers, also from the international countries, as even if there are Italian from Sicily, of course. We are very happy to host Sabrina in Italy, in Pisa as well. We are now very, very proud. We have a special session every year. There is a special session devoted to game, and there are a lot of game developers that in the last years have developed games in hackathon in the Internet Festival. So 3 days devoted to stay all the days, 24 hours a day, to develop very interesting games, and some of them have been indeed obtained some interesting results also on the commercial side. But the interesting idea of this specific activity today was to put side by side people working in the research, game developer, and so there is a synergy between basic research and applications. Real application. And this is what we want from the very beginning. The initial idea of the Internet Festival and the very first edition was exactly what you are experimenting today, and in a specific, very complicated job, which is quantum computing. And so I hope that all the people will enjoy it. I enjoy. And unfortunately, I have another event in 5 minutes, so I have to leave. And I have to thank Marilu and Sabrina. By the way, nice to meet you. To have organized this very important hackathon, and I hope to be able to join you in the final day of the hackathon, just to see what was happened in these days. So thank you to everybody, and we hope to have you in Pisa next year, and we hope to meet you personally, all the people, because we are calling me from the other talk. One of the important points of the Internet Center is also collaboration. Collaboration face by face, and of course this year, because of the COVID and all the issues related to the COVID problems, we were not able to have face by face collaboration. But we hope next year to have another hackathon in quantum game and face by face, where you can show to all the people what is going on and what are the results in this interesting field of research and of application. So thank you very much. Grazie mille per averlo organizzato. And
thank you.
All the people working in the hackathon, do a good job. Bye-bye.
And have a lot of fun. Thank you very much, Gianluigi, for these forwards. And actually, I like also to pass everybody the greetings also from Andrea Ferrara, who's from the Scuola Normale Superiore. In particular, he's the chair of the Classe di Scienze, and he's one of our persons in the committee, in the scientific committee, and one of our partners in this general field, more general field of research. Andrea was as well committed in other events, but this gives me the opportunity also to remind everyone who doesn't know very well the context that Pisa indeed counts is a very small town in terms of number of residents, something like 90,000 residents, even though every day we have in town something like 180,000 or 200,000 persons, because it is one of the largest universities in Italy, counting more than 50,000 students. And indeed, in this kind of 2 square kilometers of space, of surface, are located 3 universities: the University of Pisa, one of the most ancient, and the Scuola Normale Superiore and the Scuola Sant'Anna, in this largest area of the National Research Council in Italy, that is CNR. And then there are more than 20 labs that stem from this university and academic system, and also many spin-offs, among which indeed is, for example, VIS-Virtual immersion in science. And so this is also one reason why this festival was born here in Pisa, because of the kind of environment and atmosphere and context is especially fertile, but also because here has been from one place next to the Leaning Tower, actually, has been switched on the first ping, the first internet signal almost 30 years ago, certainly in Italy, but I think also in Europe. And here is where it has been built up, the first electronic calculator, under suggestion of Enrico Fermi, who was one of the scientists who grew up, in particular the Scuola Normale, in this scientific environment. So I hope, we wish that this atmosphere will also nurture the next days. And it is also my, with Sabrina, we thought that we had also to tell you how this idea was born, in particular the idea of the Quantum Game Jam here at the Internet Festival, as I think many of the persons listening know, certainly those who participated also to the previous editions of the Quantum Game Jams. This is, Sabrina, is the 6th, right? There have been 5 editions of Quantum Game Jams earlier.
The first one was in 2014, so yeah, I think so.
Indeed, and the last was in Helsinki in 2019. But as I was saying in the introduction, in the very first words, this is the first Quantum Game Jam in Italy. How it was born? Well, Sabrina and I, even though we are very close in our respective research fields, Sabrina said her research field. My field is condensed matter physics in general, indeed, but then in particular quantum liquids. We met for the first time ever in our scientific lives, something like 1 year ago, 1.5 years ago, at KITP, Kavli Institute for Theoretical Physics, in Santa Barbara, California, during one of these long workshops that, for those who are not physicists, are these wonderful contexts that physicists create in order to travel a lot and to have time together, even coming from very different cultures, very different worlds, to do research, to make research together on frontier topics, on research topics that are really at the edge of international research. And in that in that occasion, when we first met with Sabrina, I can't say, I don't know whether Sabrina agrees on that. She will say, she will tell, but it has been something like a first sight love, I would call it, because we really immediately shared not only enthusiasm and a lot of ideas about our research, our research staff and kind of activity, but also about the way in which research should be conducted, how much fun one should also try to create in this beautiful activity that we feel we have the privilege to, even if it is very tiring. We want us to work a lot, but there is also a lot of fun. And also we shared the importance, the crucial importance on building up educational context where educate general public about the content of even difficult and challenging research, and so also to make outreach, even because we are deeply convinced that having the opportunity of doing research also in fundamental physics or also applied physics, it doesn't matter, but in any event, it is important that the citizens may have their own tools for understanding what has been done and how the money, very often public money, as in our case, is spent for the progress and the advancement of knowledge for humanity. And so we have started thinking and sharing a lot of ideas. And so this first meeting has become, in order, a proposal, a project for doing outreach with video games. And this is one realization of these ideas. And then has become also a proposal that is called IQ Minds, that is aimed at building a problem solver, a quantum problem solver, for quantum problems, that brings together the best power of human mind, that is creativity and visual intuition, with the wonderful power of the best computers. They can be classical computers or quantum computers. And and this is something very cross-disciplinary that brings together quantum physics and neuroscience. And I want to cite here my colleague, neuroscientist of the University of Pisa, Concetta Morrone, and also game developers and also computer scientists. So a very important team worldwide, among which also is IBM Zurich and Unity, and MyTail and VIS and QSide and IFO, many different institutions besides University of Pisa and Turku University. And you will meet many of the main characters of this team, either in the presentations of the teams today or in the teams where you will play and you will develop your wonderful games. Okay, so this is the way everything was born, and I think that it is now time to provide everyone with a general introduction about quantum physics, because it is, of course, this is of course a great challenge for every one of us, because in these 3 days There will be physicists meeting with game developers, and the physicists will be at various degrees of expertise. And so we really need to share a language and to have the minimal tools to be able to work together. And so I think that Sabrina, is now time for Sabrina to start the presentation. That will be, you are going to attend a beautiful introduction to quantum physics. Everything that you wanted to know about quantum physics and you wanted to ask.
Maybe this is a lot.
Maybe
I will try
that we are you will see that we are going to see a lot of doubts, more doubts than certainties in these 3 days.
And this is of course always a good thing. And before actually my presentation, I would like to share really a very few words with you about the quantum game jams. I would like also to address a little bit the participants of these quantum game jams, because I think I would like to express a few concepts that are very important. And for those of you who are following and you are not participating to the quantum game jam, this maybe will give you a little bit of idea of the spirit and the atmosphere that we are trying to create. And especially why are we doing quantum games, and when did we start? As Marilu said, this was an idea, I would say a little bit of a crazy idea that was initiated by myself and my group and the Finnish Game Jam Association in 2014. And of course, we have been every year organizing game jams in crazy places, in university labs, in planetarium, in science museum, even in a Ferry wheel in Helsinki last year. But of course, we are not the only ones organizing game jams. There are very many online events and also in-presence events that are organized worldwide. And it's becoming more and more popular. The reason why we thought that this would be a nice concept and idea is that we think it's an interesting way to bring together researchers in quantum physics and many other types of professionals and students and people who are interested in the concepts of games, in order to brainstorm and to open up new channels for creativity that come into play when people with different backgrounds, points of view, and experience also come together. And I would like to say that a few important things. Game jams are absolutely non-competitive events, so there is no winner. The idea is really to divide into teams and work together. And in this case, in each team, or ideally in each team, but even if it's not in each team, we will have also many mentors that are physicists, and they are really willing and desiring to interact with the game developer, coders, graphic designers, in order to create video games inspired by quantum physics, ideally even educational. In some cases, we even had video games that allow to do research in quantum physics in a citizen science framework. And what I would like to say is that by no means you should think that if you are not a physicist, you should have already some understanding of quantum physics. No previous knowledge of quantum physics is necessary in the game jam. That's why we have the physicists, and that's why we hope that we will discuss, and that's why we hope that this will enhance the creative process. And also, don't be scared of the physicists. They are humans like you. They are nice people, and they are willing to interact with you. Also, I would like to say that definitely in game jams and in life, I would say there are no stupid questions. Don't be afraid to ask to your mentors. And actually, what you think might be a stupid question can be indeed very, very deep and can be stimulating in the discussion. So I would say that it is perfectly okay if you have the feeling after the presentations that we are going to give now, that you don't understand actually, that you don't understand anything, or that things are confused. It's okay. It's perfectly fine. We are doing our best. But of course, quantum mechanics is counterintuitive. So it is really because of these fascinating and counterintuitive aspects that we think a lot of interesting and creative projects can be born. And then finally, the last thing is, as you know, if you've participated in game jams, if you have not, let me tell you, perfection is your worst enemy, fun is your best friend. So try to have fun and enjoy this weekend with us. And I think these were my main messages. I hope I'm not forgetting anything. I will have time at the end to acknowledge also the great help and the organization of many, many people from the IF side, of course, but also from the point of view of our teams, Marilu's teams, my teams, Natasha and Mitei's, IGDA. So many, many actors, many people are coming together to make this possible. And now, without further ado, I will start the presentation on quantum physics. And this, however, will require one more minute because I have to share my screen. Okay. Application window. Yes, I think it's here. I hope you see it.
Yep.
Okay, very nice. So I chose as a title of my presentation, The Beauty of Quantum Physics. And I hope that you will be inspired by the description I'm trying to give you of quantum physics, which is my job. Actually, I'm a researcher in quantum physics, but also my passion, really. So what is quantum physics? Quantum physics is a theory, and of course, now we will see it has also experimental, but also applicative sides that describes the behavior of microscopic particles, or rather was born to describe the behavior of microscopic particles like atoms or electrons. And to use the words of Nobel laureate Anthony Leggett, he says, quantum mechanics is very much more than just a theory. It is a completely new way of looking at the world, involving a change in paradigm, perhaps more radical than any other in the history of human thought. A change in paradigm more radical than any other. And hopefully we'll see why and in which sense. Quantum mechanics has nowadays become an indispensable tool for almost each sub-branch of physics, from the cosmology of the early universe to the physics of human vision, from the structure of the nucleon to the behavior of superconductor. And I could add here computers, lasers, transistors. They are all working based on discoveries made by quantum physics or with quantum physics. So quantum physics is undoubtedly the fundamental physical theory of the universe. And yet again, the behavior of microscopic particles is really counterintuitive when we compare it to our daily experience of the world, to what we day by day experience as our nature around us. So atoms or electrons, for example, can pass through solid walls. This is a phenomenon known as quantum tunneling. But of course, we don't experience this in our daily life. So what does it actually mean? It isn't so easy to talk about quantum physics to people. And it's not because normal people, I call them normal people as opposed to physicists, but let's say people, like most of you, really don't quite care about quantum physics or have better things to talk about. On the contrary, I believe that there are a lot of people that are actually interested and eager to hear quantum stories. But the problem is the language. Because the only way we have to describe this hidden and mysterious quantum wonderland, the only really correct way we can tell what quantum tunneling is by using a very difficult and not so widespread language, that is mathematics. And the mathematics of quantum physics is not a language that I can speak with many of you. So we are having a quantum game jam, but many participants do not have this language. Now, the reason why mathematics is the language of quantum physics is very, very deep. While we have a very powerful mathematical description of electrons, atoms, and quantum objects, and this is indeed the formulation of quantum theory, we lack any form of intuition about their physical reality, the physical reality of these objects. And we are even pushed to question whether we can talk of their objective reality at all. And physicist Richard Feynman clearly illustrates our difficulty with the description of the atom, saying that it's like having a car for which we can make very accurate prediction. Say we can describe the car's speed because we have the theory right, but we cannot picture the car. Similarly, I know how to describe mathematically a particle that is, we call it in a quantum superposition of being here or there, or north or south, or right or up. I have the math right. But the only thing I can try to say is to tell you it is as if the particle is at the same time here and there, and this is not enough. The only correct way is really the mathematical theory. So if I would try to use math once again, what most of you would see are just symbols written on a blackboard. Can we picture a quantum superposition? So what does it actually mean to be north and south at the same time? How can we possibly even try to have an intuition of something that we have never experienced and perhaps we will never experience? And why can an atom be here and there at the same time in a quantum superposition of two positions, and I cannot? I'm made of atoms, after all. And actually, since even objects visible to the eye have been prepared in experiments in states in which at the same time they vibrate and are at rest. There are experiments in which this has been realized. Then if this has been created, I mean, are we really sure that I cannot be here and there at the same time? Or is it just too difficult to put me in this state? Is there any physical law preventing me to be in Sicily and in Finland at the same time? Because if not, of course, I would like to try it. How would it feel like? How would my mind and consciousness experience that? I could at the same time be eating an ice cream in Sicily and being in sauna in Finland, which are two of my main passions. It would be extremely cool. But quantum superpositions are very, very difficult to observe in experiments. And it has taken several decades before the famous Schrödinger cat experiment. It was initially a Gedanken experiment of a cat in a box in a superposition of being dead and alive has been realized. And of course, not with a real cat, but with something that is close to a little bit more macroscopic, we say, a little bit bigger, but of course, still within the realm of experimental quantum physics. And the reason why it is so difficult to measure in experiments quantum superpositions of macroscopic objects is because they are very quickly destroyed by the interaction with what we call their external environment, everything around them. What happens is that because of the interconnection, or also we will use the word quantum entanglement. Okay? It's another special type of quantum correlations among particles that do not even allow them to define them as independent particles, but they become really like one thing. But if, because of this interconnection between a particle being here and there, in a superposition of here and there, and all the things around her, because of this interconnection, all the features of the quantum superpositions are washed out, and the particles will acquire the objective property of position, of being either here or there, either north or south, position, something that we are used to finally. But bear in mind, this is rather curious. Another way of saying this is that if a particle could be completely isolated and nobody ever tried to watch her, then she may well not possess a property like a definite position. It acquires such property, and in turn, its objective reality, for what we understand of it, only after it is observed. And of course, this does not mean that there really should be someone looking at the particle. What it means is that everything around the particle, her environment, behaves as something that continuously observes her, and therefore, in this way, effectively makes her real. This is truly mind-blowing. It is the interconnection between all objects in nature that eventually defines them as having an objective reality. It is the interconnection between everything that exists that eventually makes things real. And it is because of this interconnection that dichotomies like north or south, here and there, ice cream and sauna, means in Finland and in Sicily. Because of these dichotomies actually disappear when we pass from the quantum description to the classical description. I want to conclude this short presentation that I hope at least created some questions and some surprise in you. I would like to conclude this presentation with the words of a very famous physicist, that is Richard Feynman. And the reason why I'm talking about, or I will try to show you a small video, original video of Richard Feynman, is because it is really very nicely summarizing what I was trying to explain in this presentation, but also because Richard Feynman is a key actor here in our presentation of the themes that will follow my presentation. And this is because in the 80s, he was one of the physicists who anticipated the concept of a quantum computer. In this video that I will show you, Richard Feynman beautifully explain the problems we have still with quantum physics, or rather with our lack of intuition about this theory. And these problems are still existing today. And I would like to, before showing the video, I hope that you will be able to hear it well. It's a very old video, and you'll hear a very strong American accent, of course, it's Feynman speaking. But it's fascinating, I think, to hear him elaborate on this topic. While you listen to him, think about this question. Can we use games to either build intuition on quantum phenomena, or perhaps even contribute to quantum research? Or even more radically, can we brainstorm about games on something which does not even have an intuitive behavior, a reality which still eludes our understanding, and that at the same time, for sure, underlies the universe in which we live? Let's try to listen to this.
That little things behaved very differently than anything that was big. Anything that you're familiar with, because you see, as the animal evolves and so on, and his brain evolves, it gets used to handling. The brain is designed for ordinary circumstances. But if the gut particles in the deep inner workings were by some other rules and some other character. They behaved differently. They were very different than anything on a large scale. Then there would be some kind of difficulty in understanding and imagining reality. And that difficulty we are in. The behavior of things on a small scale is so fantastic. It's so wonderfully different, so marvelously different than anything that behaves on a large scale. You say electrons act like waves. No, they don't exactly. They act like particles. No, they don't exactly. They act like a kind of a fog around the nucleus. No, they don't exactly. And if you would like to get a clear, sharp picture of an atom so that you can tell exactly how it's going to behave correctly and have a good image, in other words, a really good image of reality, I don't know how to do it. Because that image has to be mathematical. We have a mathematical expression, strange as mathematics, I don't understand how it is, but we can write mathematical expressions and calculate what the thing is going to do without actually being able to picture it. It would be something like a computer that you put certain numbers in and you have the formula for at what time the car will arrive at different destinations, and the thing does the arithmetic to figure out what time the car arrives at the different destinations, but cannot picture the car. It's just doing the arithmetic. So we know how to do the arithmetic, but we cannot picture the car. No, it's not 100% because for certain situations, a certain kind of approximate picture works. That is simply a fog around the nucleus that when you squeeze it, it repels you, is very good for understanding the stiffness of material. That it's a wave which does this and that is very good for some other phenomenon. All right. So when you're working with certain particular aspects of the behavior of atoms, for instance, when I was talking about temperature and so forth, that they're just little balls is good enough, and it gives a very nice picture of temperature. But if you ask more specific questions and you get down to questions like, how is it that when you cool helium down, even to absolute zero, where there's not supposed to be any motion, it's a perfect fluid that hasn't any viscosity, has no resistance, flows perfectly, and isn't freezing? Well, if you want to get a picture of atoms that has all of that in it, I can't do it, you see. But I can explain why the helium behaves as it does by taking my equations and showing that consequences of them is that the helium will behave as it is observed to behave. So we know we have the theory right, but we haven't got the pictures that will go with the theory. And is that because we're limited and haven't caught on to the right pictures? Or is that because there aren't any right pictures for people who have to make pictures out of things that are familiar to them? Well, let's suppose it's the last one, that there's no right pictures in terms of things that are familiar to them. Is it possible then to develop a familiarity with those things that are not familiar on hand by study? By learning about the properties of atoms and quantum mechanics, by practicing with the equations until it becomes a kind of second nature, just like it's second nature to know that if two balls came toward each other, they'd smash into bits. You don't say the two balls, when they come toward each other, turn blue. You know what they do. So the question is whether you could get to know what things do without better than we do today. You know, as the generations develop, will they invent ways of teaching and ways so that the new people will learn the tricky ways of looking at things and be so trained, so well trained, that they won't have our troubles with the atom picturing? There's still a school of thought that cannot believe that the atomic behavior is so different than large-scale behavior. I think that's a deep prejudice. It's a prejudice from being so used to large-scale behavior. And they're always seeking waiting for the day that we discover that underneath the quantum mechanics, there's some mundane, ordinary balls hitting or particles moving and so on. I think they're going to be defeated. I think nature's imagination is so much greater than man's, she's never going to let us relax.
And I would like to conclude repeating this sentence. It is very beautiful. I think nature's imagination is so much greater than man's. She's never going to let us relax. And now I would like to invite Marilu to tell about the three themes that you see here announced. Marilu.
All right, so many thanks, Sabrina, for this introduction to the beauties of quantum physics. And with Sabrina, and also with the scientific committee of the Quantum Game Jam, we have selected the three themes that you now see in the slide. So quantum computers, quantum biology, and quantum physics and the brain. There is a logic, if we can speak about logic, in these teams, in joining all these teams. But first of all, I'd like to introduce you the scientific committee who has thought these topics, where are indeed Andrea Ferrara from the Scuola Normale, and besides Sabrina and myself, Marcos Valdez from the VIS, the Virtual Immersion in Science, the spin-off of the Scuola Normale for outreach, James Hutton, who is a researcher from IBM, and he will be actually the first presenter of Team 1 on quantum computers. Then Team 2 will be introduced on quantum biology, will be introduced by Laura Pisnen from the Turku University, and I will say something more later on. And then Team 3 that will be introduced by myself. But first of all, before going into the details of the teams, each presentation, as you know from the schedule, will last a quarter of an hour, 15 minutes. Sabrina and I would like to tell you about the general idea that is behind the choice of these three teams. As a general statement, we can say that these three teams intersect quantum physics, life, and mind. So we could say everything that we can that we would like to know about our everyday life, and also everything about the universe, we could say. So it is a very general intersection and interconnection. As Sabrina pointed out in her general introduction to quantum physics, as far as we know today, up to today, any natural phenomenon works as ruled by the foundational laws of quantum mechanics. And indeed, the original and the very first idea for a quantum computer was indeed due, by the way, by Richard Feynman, and that's one of the reasons why Sabrina, as she told us, has chosen that slice of beautiful slice of an interview from Feynman. And the very first idea by Feynman was indeed that in order to simulate the behavior of natural phenomena, but also natural not only in physics but also in biology, it is needed to build up what today we call quantum computers. Indeed, with these quantum computers, in principle, we could design new materials that can be useful to make our everyday life particularly easier and also entertaining. But I would also say maybe these new materials could help us to do things that otherwise we could not do, or someone of us could not do. So, for example, new materials that can be important for compensating or substituting abilities that some of us could have underdeveloped or not at all available. But also new materials that can be respectful about the environment. This is an important topic, and we deeply believe that whoever makes science and does research must also take a perspective that should be completely responsible about the kind of research and innovation that carries out. But we could also imagine to use these quantum computers to design drugs or also vaccines. I think that we are unfortunately in the very critical time where to think about the importance of vaccines. Indeed, we are online mainly because of COVID. And also to deal with diseases that otherwise have no therapy, nor a drug, nor a surgeon therapy, at least nowadays. We could conceive computer science procedures for the security, the safety of our personal data, everything that goes under the title of cryptography. And in this case, we would speak about quantum cryptography, or also to to do research in the physics of atmosphere and think about, for example, what we could understand in advance about global warming and about very important problems in our everyday lives, or also to predict how financial markets behave. We have lived during the last 10 years at least two huge financial crises that maybe are more economical crises. One around 2009, 2010, and now that is driven mainly by COVID now. And what about having this kind of tools? So computers, quantum computers can really be revolutionary, not just for research, but for our everyday life. On the other hand, as James will also point out, and how maybe it was also already clear from Sabrina's speech, in order to make the quantum nature of natural processes emerge, quantum computers have to be designed and also run in very extreme conditions. In particular, for example, very low temperatures, because all of that kind of processes Sabrina was mentioning about decoherence and so on and so forth must be kept under control. And this is somehow also the other side of the same coin with respect to the fact that we keep not having a direct and personal experience with quantum phenomena, even though, as Sabrina was pointing out, was remarking, even though we know that every single phenomenon that we observe in our everyday life is ruled by quantum mechanics. And indeed, we think about quantum mechanics as a weird thing, as something bizarre, and so on. On the other hand, in the last years have grown up a number of experimental evidences accompanied also by quantum traditional, conventional quantum simulations in joint efforts between physicists and chemists and biologists about the fact that quantum phenomena can emerge also in conditions as those that take place that occur in everyday life, biological life, in biological processes, quantum phenomena can emerge in these biological processes under conditions that are not really of very low temperatures, very quiet environments, and so on and so forth. And Laura will take us in a very interesting journey in this context of biological processes, starting from those that are fundamental for life, like photosynthesis, but also other ones, for example, how some birds who migrate are able to come back precisely in the same point on Earth after being away for their migration time, but also other processes. So how in all these processes there are already evidences about the fact that quantum processes, quantum phenomena emerge. And among the life processes, of course, there is also there are also ourselves. We are in this humanistic perspective. We are at the center of also all the research that we conduct, and there is this subtle issue about our mind, how and whether our mind has to do with quantum effects, quantum processes. Of course, the mind has to do with quantum physics because it's made of molecules and atoms. I mean, our brain, right? And so quantum processes are there, but are there quantum processes taking place in our mind and emerge in our mind? Can we make our mind like if it were a computer? And if it were a computer, would that be classical or quantum computer? How much powerful? So these are all questions. We won't give any single answer, of course, but we will try just to inspire. As Sabrina was anticipating, your work and your fun during the game development, that are actually questions at the center of a very cross-disciplinary and frontier research nowadays. And we will also discover, even just touching, flying on the subject, that these questions are all interrelated among them, and are also related to concepts that we would think are far from biology, like gravity and space-time. And we will also mention one of the most interesting theories about quantum effects in the mind, that was conceived by Ameroff and Penrose, Roger Penrose, who has got his Nobel Prize a few days ago. So we have many questions to ask during these teams. We won the presentation of the teams. We won't give definite answers, of course, most often because there are no definite answers. But we can summarize the questions that we are going to ask ourselves as the following. So one question could be, how does, so let's imagine for one moment that these quantum phenomena really emerge in biological systems, in the main phenomenon having to do with life. So one question could be how nature is able to overcome all the hampers in terms of decoherence, etc., to the emergence of quantum phenomena, all those hampers that we artificially depress and suppress when we build up a quantum computer. So in one question, besides designing quantum computers to better understand nature, as Feynman and others were suggesting, since the since the dawn of quantum physics, can we learn from nature lectures about how we can design better and more effective quantum computers? And also, what can we learn from how the mind and how we know about quantum computers and quantum physics, about mind and consciousness, and also in relationships with our ability to actually our non-ability to see the emergence of quantum phenomena in our everyday life direct experience, and also on how this is connected with gravity and with the physics of the universe. So all the great mysteries that we are always so fascinated about. And so this is a very powerful interlink and interconnection of questions that we really wish can inspire the games that you are going to develop during the Quantum Game Jam in this wonderful 3 days experience together. Okay, so Sabrina, what do you think we could? I think we are just sharp on time for starting. So it's 6 o'clock, 6 p.m. So we are right on schedule, right? That's great. So I think that we can just start with the presentation of the teams. And as I was anticipating, the first who will present the team will be indeed James Wooton, who's a researcher at IBM. Hi, James.
Hi.
Many thanks not only to be here with all your competencies, but also for all of the work that you have done to help us organizing and thinking about this Quantum Game Jam. Sabrina, would you like to say something more?
Surprisingly, no.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
I will not say so.
Okay, and so James will the speech from James, the keynote will be about quantum computers.
Thank you. And now I'll do the exciting bit of sharing my screen. So you should now see my presentation. Someone let me know if you can't. And this is about, so I'm James Wooton from IBM Quantum. We are making the hardware and software behind quantum computing. I specifically look into the overlap between quantum computing and games, which is, of course, a pretty important thing for this event. So I'd like to start off with a bit of a historical context. So in the early history of computing, when normal computing started to merge with games, how that happened. So in the early history of computing, we see many examples of games, but they were typically, in the early days, for demonstrations, education, and research. Fun was not really a significant consideration, and this black and white image of a man in a suit should probably prove that for you. Arguably, the first example of a computer game was in 1950, and it was called Bertie the Brain. It was tic-tac-toe, implemented using vacuum tubes and light bulbs. And the reason why it was implemented was to take it to a trade show and basically sell vacuum tubes. Then in 1951, there was Nimrod. This took a game called Nim and implemented it again with vacuum tubes and light bulbs. And it was exhibited at the Festival of Britain. And part of the reason for that was to illustrate the algorithm and programming principles involved. Because at the time, computing would have been a new thing. It would have been hard for people to understand, just like quantum computing is now. And by having a nice approachable example in the form of a game, the hope was that people would understand a little bit more about what computing was about. And then in 1952, there was again back to tic-tac-toe, this time with vacuum tubes and cathode rays. So it's the first graphical upgrade of the computer game industry. And this was built at the University of Cambridge for research into human-computer interaction. So these are the examples of what happens in the 1950s. The 1950s in games was not about creating AAA titles and making lots of money. It was about education. It was about showcasing new technology, and it was about research. It was only, oh, and I should also note, also in the 1950s at IBM Research, there was efforts to build an AI for checkers. And this was also an example of showcasing this new technology. It was only in the 1960s that people started implementing games that didn't previously exist. Tic-tac-toe, NIM, checkers were all existing games. You could play them without a computer more easily than with a computer. But this was a game with space battles, which would be rather hard to do without a computer. This was created to test out a new device that was given to MIT to showcase its capabilities for the people making the game to learn about how to program it. So it still had these ideas of showcasing, of testing out new devices, of education, but it was also built to be fun. And by all accounts, it was fun. And in fact, one of the early commercial attempts in the computer game industry was an arcade port of this, although that didn't come for a few years yet. So when we think about combining quantum computers with games, we should be thinking in this sort of era, and not at sort of quantum Breath of the Wild, or at least that's what I would advise. If you want to try something more optimistic, then you can go for that instead. So I've got say a brief word about the need for quantum computers, although Mary Lou has done most of that for me already. So we currently have awesome computing hardware in the form of standard digital computers, but however good, however big, however fancy we build that hardware, the principles it's based on, the principle of digital computation, means that some problems are just too hard. You could build a planet-sized supercomputer, run it for the age of the universe, and certain problems still wouldn't run in that time. And that includes things like studying quantum systems for chemistry or high energy physics. And since everything is built out of chemicals, then understanding chemicals is kind of important. So here on the slide is one chemical you've probably used at some point during the day. The fact that it's on a mug probably gives you some hint that it's caffeine. So if we had a new kind of computer where software was based on the ideas of quantum mechanics and hardware could actually implement quantum mechanical phenomena, then we would be able to use a completely different architecture of computation to solve these tricky problems that normal computers can't do. And over time, it was discovered that it's not just solving quantum problems that you can do with this kind of new type of computer. It is a general purpose computer which can do also optimization problems, machine learning problems, and all kinds of things. So it's a new kind of computer to solve some of those problems that normal computers can't reach. Now, it's taken a few years or even a few decades to build up to the hardware that can actually run the software and solve these kinds of problems. We're still at a prototype stage, but we are getting there. So just like standard digital computers have processors which process bits, the hardware for a quantum computer is based on quantum bits, so bits that can behave in a quantum mechanical way to have this notion of superposition, as Sabrina mentioned earlier. And we often call these qubits. And you can see a cartoon of a device here where you've got a bunch of qubits sitting on the device. And typically we program these in a sort of machine code kind of way, where we're not doing high level things like, you know, adding and multiplying that we often do in normal programming, but we're very much working at the level of bits. We know where our bits are. We know what operations we can do on those bits. We know which bits are allowed to talk to which other bits, and we manipulate information at that level. These are called gates, and if you know anything about the Boolean circuits, which are the heart of normal digital computing, then maybe quantum computing will seem very familiar to you. This is one of the main things that you have to adapt to when looking at quantum computing is thinking about it in the machine code level and being very aware of your bits and how you're manipulating them. So quantum computing hardware, as I said, is currently at prototype stage. It's not big and powerful enough to solve these really hard problems that we're working towards, but there is a lot to experiment with, and devices are available on the cloud for free and publicly available to all. So these are IBM devices that we provide access to at this website, quantum-computing.ibm.com. And here's a nice little video depicting that process. So you sit at home on your laptop, you write a quantum program, it gets sent off over the internet and then arrives in the control equipment in our labs. It then gets turned into a series of microwave pulses, which can actually affect the quantum hardware. And hardware is kept in a dilution refrigerator where it's cooled to be one of the coldest points in the universe. And then it sends out the signal, it gets processed, turned back into nice zeros and ones, and delivered to your door. So you have quantum computers that you can use now. So now let's talk about quantum games, which is what you're wanting to create during this game jam. So for quantum games, you need a few things, not least you need an idea. So what might you do? How might you do a quantum game? Well, you could draw inspiration from the early history of computer games and think about education and showcasing technology. If you are someone who doesn't know anything about quantum computing, then you could make this game to help yourself learn quantum computing as an example of a tactile exercise in the quantum world. So you can look at some educational resources, learn some simple quantum gates, some simple ways to manipulate qubits, and build a game around them. The first game ever built for a quantum computer involved basically only one qubit, using one qubit to store information, using one qubit manipulations to implement a game mechanic. So you don't have to do big fancy algorithms. You can just decide, I'm only going to learn how one qubit works during this game jam, but I'm going to really learn how one qubit works, and I'm going to build a game mechanic around what I've learned. If you do know about quantum computing, one thing you could do is make a game to help other people learn. So when you play a game, you learn the game mechanic. You learn how all of the moves work and what they do and how they can be combined. So if the things in the game are based on quantum gates, then the player is learning quantum gates and how they work and how they combine. So you can make a game so that learning about quantum computing is more intuitive. Or if you don't want to think about the machine code of quantum computing, we also have high-level tools that we have created to do image manipulation and terrain generation, where you can think about things at a higher level. But it would be good if you also implemented a few of the low-level things in there, but that exists, and we even have integration with Unity for that. So if you want to know where to get these resources for these things, then you can go to qiskit.it/first-quantum-game. Don't rush to write that down because it's going to be on the next few slides as well. So for another thing, to build a quantum game, you need quantum. So you need to write your quantum software. For that, we have a framework that is Python-based that you can use. So you just write it in Python. You don't have to use some mystical, magical language. It's just normal Python to create your quantum programs. It's called Qiskit. And once you've created your quantum program, you need to run it. So one way to run a quantum program is using quantum hardware. And that is in our labs. And you have to use this cloud service, the IBM Quantum Experience, if you want to do that. So you submit a job using Qiskit. It goes off to run on our hardware. And you have to wait for at least a few minutes for the result. Or you might have to wait for more than a few minutes, depending on what the queue is. So here's the queue. You see this Melbourne device, which has 15 qubits, had a queue of 47 jobs earlier. So that would probably take more than a few minutes to get a result back. So if you want to use real hardware, you have to think about how you're going to manage that wait time in your game. However, not many games have actually used real quantum hardware. So if you do overcome that challenge, you will be on the small list of truly quantum games. But an alternative is that if you're using very simple quantum programs, and if you're just looking at 1 or 2 qubits, that is a very simple quantum program, which can easily be emulated on a normal computer. So you don't have to go beyond your laptop in order to run it. So the software to emulate it is part of Qiskit, so you don't have to go anywhere for that. It allows you to get the results very quickly. So if you do want to call a quantum process every frame, that's fine. Just don't use real quantum hardware, use a simulator. And by far, most of the games made at quantum game jams or hackathons have been in this form. For example, the Q-Pong that you can see on the screen. And for quantum games, you also need a game engine. So this is also true of normal games. So what game engine to use? Qiskit is based in Python, and there are game engines based in Python, such as Pygame. So the advantage of this is that you're using the same language as Qiskit. So creating and running your quantum software is going to be very easy in this case. However, the trouble with Pygame is it's not very easy to share games. You want people to play your game at the end, and you probably don't want to give them installation instructions, which involves open up a terminal window and type in these commands, because that's going to cut down your audience a fair bit. One way around this is that there is a game engine specifically built to run in the IBM quantum experience. And so Qiskit and the hardware is already there in the IBM quantum experience. So it's very easy integration of the quantum. One downside is that the game engine is very simplistic. So there's a screenshot of it on the screen. So here you can see the screen is 8 by 8. The color palette is limited. The controller is just pushing buttons on a screen. Things only happen when you push a button. You can't have continuously moving enemies or anything. So that's a disadvantage, but it could also be an advantage for a game jam because limitations breed creativity. But also you might want to use a proper game engine, something like Unity or Godot, or there's all kinds of game engines. None of them use Python. But there are ways to get Qiskit working in there. And also we have something called micro Qiskit, which is a minimal re-implementation of Qiskit in multiple languages, such as C++, C#, and Lua, all of which great languages for game development. So go to qisk.it/first-quantum-game, and that's where all of the links you might ever need are to learn about quantum computing and how to use Qiskit. And that is all I have to say. Now's the time to start playing with quantum computing, and I hope you have fun making a quantum game. So,
thank you, James. That's really exciting. And now it is the turn of Laura Pispanen. She's a PhD student at the University of Turku, and welcome, Laura, in the group of Sabrina. And Laura will introduce the theme about quantum effects and in biological systems.
Yes, I will.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. Let's see. Sharing my window. Yes, and I hope you see it. So, quantum biology, I'm going to, like I've written here, explain life with quantum mechanics. And like Sabrina and Marie-Lou outlined earlier, we do not witness quantum in our day-to-day life. And in addition, like James here kindly explained on the workings of IBM's quantum devices, controlling and witnessing these phenomena requires really prestige conditions, like really cold conditions and isolation and such. So why would something like biology have anything to do with quantum? It's what we're going to go through today. I will start with the sun. There, quantum tunneling allows for the thermonuclear fusion of 2 hydrogen atoms combining in the helium. You can imagine the positively charged protons in the nuclei of these atoms. They have a repelling force between them. You know, if 2 things are positively charged. They don't want to get together. But like in the highly pressured core of the sun, quantum tunneling then allows these particles to pass this potential barrier in order for then the nuclear force to bind the protons together. And as these bind together, the binding energy of helium is smaller, and we'll get some excess energy. That's the point we want to take home from here. And then this energy manifests itself in the form of heat that we feel here on Earth, and light particles that we call photons. So after the really chaotic journey from the sun's core to the surface, and then some 150 kilometers it takes to reach Earth, plants, algae, and bacteria even are able to capture these photons. And what they do is transform them into chemical energy. What? So this is the act of photosynthesis that we've probably seen in textbooks and probably remember from school. And we've learned how carbon dioxide combined with water produces as sugar and oxygen that are like the main ingredients for life on Earth, we'd say. But before all this is able to happen, we need light. We need to now understand the role of light here, photons in this process. And here, as a picture in the background, we see moss plant cells with visible tiny little things that are called chloroplasts. And we're going to take a closer look on them. This is where the photon is actually catched.
Laura, sorry to
yes.
interrupt you. Can you please get closer to your microphone, because
yes, thank you for telling me.
Yeah, the sound is comes from far away, and there is also a noise.
There's a noise, yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Yes. So inside these chloroplasts, we have these tiny little pancake look-like thingies called thylakoids. And then inside those, we have chlorophyll. And this is the green pigment that gives the color for the plants and bacteria. And this is where a photon is catched. And it's catched because the photon activates an excitation on these molecules. And this is a weird word, but basically when you have an atom of some sort that is in this molecule, when the photon hits an electron, it just excites. So it has the energy of the photon. So when light reaches these chloroplasts, it creates this excitation that then like hops from one molecule to another to reach a so-called reaction center of the plant. And this journey in general is thought to be random. But the thing is, like, if the hopping was purely random, it would not be as efficient as we observe in nature. And this is the mystery here. So maybe the answer might come from quantum mechanics. Maybe the photon finds its way to the reaction center by using quantum superposition. So instead of hopping randomly, maybe the photon goes through all the paths to the reaction center simultaneously. And this way, kind of like acting like a wave across all the molecules here, maybe that is the way it finds its way. So is there a proof for anything of this sort? Well, yes, there is. In a study done in 2007 called Evidence for Wave-like Energy Transfer Through Quantum Coherence in Photosynthetic Systems, a long name, researchers actually, they shot pulses of laser light into this really complicated structure of a photosynthetic complex found in bacteria. And that produced a light signal back that showed interference between different pathways. So there was basically what we see here is an interference pattern of intensifying the dominant energy transport pathways in that complex. So the energy transfer involving like this oscillation pattern of here of the population between the, so to say, donors and acceptors. So this is something that they actually called a quantum beat, that you might imagine. But what is this quantum beat? Is it truly quantum? You can speculate. Maybe it's just molecular vibration instead of coherence, or maybe the amplitude witnessed here isn't large enough to have originated from these excitations. Or maybe we actually have like evidence of quantum biological processes. And the interesting thing here is like, what possibilities would this bring? Like, there's the development of spectroscopy that allows and enables us to study smaller and smaller time and length scales that then reveal like these delicate processes between in the intersection of classical and quantum effects. So maybe we could learn like new design principles for biologically inspired quantum nanotechnologies or something like that, or maybe we are able to make the biological processes or technologies that we know even more efficient and enhance them even at room temperatures. So the interesting thing is that what happens at these scales? What is quantum in biology? And what defeats this so-called Mr. Decoherence, the act of observing all the time and losing the quantum abilities of a system. So I present you the question, what possibilities would this bring? I'm just going to encourage you to enjoy the jam. Do not stress too much about understanding too much about this, but rather just get inspired, create something cool, and explore all the possibilities that there is. And I thank you with that. I'm hoping to see you later then on Discord to talk more about these things.
All right, many thanks, Laura. I think that this idea that quantum effects can emerge in biological systems is really quite interesting, even though it is a subject and an area of research that is highly debated. And we are going to, now we are going to face an area of research that is even more highly debated. That is what I will discuss in the next and last team presentation. That is about quantum effects, quantum physics, and the mind. So I'm going to share my presentation. Oops, no. Okay, here it is. Good. Can you see it? Okay, yes. Okay, so this is quantum physics and the mind. So I will actually recover some of the ideas that James and Laura have already discussed, illustrated. And of course, this is a very interdisciplinary field of research, and that I try to discuss in the most simpler manner, trying first of all to provide everyone with some tools and just some information and mainly inspiration. The main question that of course one might ask, speaking about quantum physics, and in general physics and mind is whether mind does work like a computer. And of course, it is a huge question that is the subject, as we have experience, of a number of science fiction movies and books and popular culture artworks. My favorite, and I must say, cult movie in this is Blade Runner by Ridley Scott. I don't know how many of you have watched the movie. I did it several times. Here depicted two among the main characters of the movie, and he's Rick Deckard and she's Rachel. Deckard is a Blade Runner, so his job is to be able to distinguish a real human from a synthetic human. And Rachel happens to be a synthetic woman who believes to be a real human. And eventually, this is one of the scenes where at the end of this part of the movie, Deckard is able to understand the truth. So the question I posed in the previous slide can be decomposed in a number of other questions, and mainly I try to outline the main ones. One is whether we can make a mind out of a computer. Of course, provided the computer is powerful enough, and we have also to understand how powerful should it be. If the answer to this question is yes, then we should also ask ourselves where in our brain we can locate the unit of information, and whether this should be a classical bit or, as we heard from James, a quantum bit, so a qubit. If the answer to the question whether we can make a mind out of a computer is not, or if the answer is, well, you know, we can, the mind can work partly like a computer, we mean in an algorithmic manner, and partly not. So if the answer is either not or both, then we should ask ourselves why, how, and what this happens. And these are all questions that are related to fundamental questions like our automatic behavior. For example, when we drive a car, we don't think every time to all the theory that we have learned, how the engine works, etc. We just sit down and drive the car. So our autopilot behavior, our consciousness instead, and also issues that have to do with the free will, the evolution, biological evolution of living beings, and so on and so forth. So in order to start entering this very complex field, we should first of all understand, have some information about how the brain is made, and something about physiology. By the way, during the presentation that you will find, as all the other presentations, available on the website, I also had care about writing some useful reviews and papers that you could read if you are especially curious. Okay, so of course, this would be a very complex story to tell in full, but mainly we have, our brain is made of neurons. There are something like 10 to the 11, so a 1 followed by 11 zeros, neurons in our brain. This is the way a neuron is typically depicted. There are many parts, but we will focus progressively zooming in on one specific part, that is that are the dendrites and cell soma, that are this structure here that you see. We zoom in these ones, and we see that there is an entire world inside. There are these finer and smaller structures. You see these green rods that are called microtubuli. And these are connected by proteins. They are called indeed microtubuli associated proteins, these that are depicted here with these links. And they are organized in lattices that, as we can see from this experimental picture, measurement, they are generally with an hexagonal structure, okay? Or can also have a rectangular structure. And then there are these gap junctions that can be open or closed, and are some kind of another channel that can put in contact different pieces of these lattices of microtubuli. Okay, but then let's see how a microtubule is done. In turn, a microtubule is a very complex structure that is made up of filaments of proteins that are called tubulins. There are, in one microtubule, there are 13 of these that are rounded up into an hollow cylinder. The radius is something like 25 nanometers. And these tubulins have this kind of peanut shape, and contain a lot of what are called aromatic rings. They are rings of atoms where the electrons are able to do a kind of dance, to dance back and forth, so to oscillate in a manner that, depending on the displacement, we could identify what we would call a 0 or a 1 in referring to a unit of information, so a bit. But of course, if quantum effects are there, we could also imagine that these two are in a superposition, as Sabrina and also James have discussed, in a superposition of these states that we could call a qubit. Okay, so all this happens. These tubulins are in 8 times 4 nanometers, okay? What is also interesting is that these lattices have multiple winding patterns that intersect at specific intervals that in units of these structures here match a Fibonacci series. So in these units, each intersection has an interval first of 3, then 5, then 8, and so on and so forth. And because of this dancing of electrons, or also of the spins of the electrons, we don't know what is going on really in there, what is really relevant. These microtubuli, they can vibrate collectively with 8 different type of vibrations. So you can imagine like a resonance board of a violin that when you tap on it can vibrate in different manners, okay? And so these are vibrations that can cover all the range from something like 40 hertz to something like almost 1 gigahertz, so 1 billion hertz. And what we are interested in is 10 megahertz. So one question at this point, following the initial questions, is where the unit of information is located. Of course, these are all guesses that we are going to make. And how much powerful should be the brain, so the computer, I mean, that can make our mind. And here it is a simple exercise of numbers. So let's imagine that the unit of information are located in the synapses, in the neuron. There are something like 1,000, so 10 to the 3 synapses in each neuron. Each synapse can perform something like 100, 10 to the 2 operations per second. If we multiply this by 10 to the 11 neurons in the brain, then we get, you know, when we multiply these numbers, we have to sum up 11 with 3 and with 2, and we get 10 to the 16 operations per second. But what about if our units are located in the tubulins? there are something like 10 to the 8, so 100 million tubulins in each neuron. And each of these can oscillate. For example, the main oscillation that is relevant is at 10 megahertz, so 10 to the 7 oscillations per second, that multiplied by 10 to the 11 neurons makes instead 10 to the 26 operations per second. So the question is there if everything is based on synapses instead than tubulins, we could also imagine to have a chance to make a computer that is able to make all these operations per second. We are not right there, but we are not that far. And this is somehow the approach taken by artificial intelligence about the idea of making, except for consciousness, etc., to make a mind, okay, to make artificial minds. But what about 10 to the 26? It's very a huge number, okay? Second point, how quantum would quantum be? So, which kind of quantum processes could happen inside these structures that we have just looked up? So here we'll fully refer to what Sabrina said in her speech and also what Laura said. The main effects are the most beautiful quantum effects. So the same coherent energy charge transfer that Laura has described in the photosynthesis process can take place here, only that instead of having the cells that play a role in the photosynthesis, here we would have combinations of microtubuli. And so having a coherent energy transfer of information, partly coherent among these sets of different colors, and part incoherent, which are the kind of oscillations that then are organized in a coherent manner, are these oscillations of the electrons in these aromatic rings that you see here, and here are depicted with this yellow and blue kind of direction of oscillations. Or they could be a quantum superposition, the gray depiction here, a kind of qubit. But we could also have entanglement between, for example, these that are called Posner molecules. They are molecules that look like distorted cubes. At the vertices are calcium atoms, and the yellow ones are instead phosphates that are molecules of oxygens and phosphorus. And there are evidences according to which it is possible to have entanglement between the modes of these the phosphates in these Posner molecules that could drive correlated release of neurotransmitters. Then we could also have a quantum spin, because if the unit of information is not given by the 1 and 0, the oscillation of the electron densities, but of the spins of the electrons, so then we could have quantum spin issues and also quantum tunneling and so on and so forth. So these are the kind of quantum effects. But then what about consciousness? And here I decided to give you the theory. There are many of them, but this theory that is due to Hameroff and Penrose, Stuart Hameroff and Roger Penrose, is actually one of the most complete. At least it has considered many different issues, and has been also, it is also the subject of a huge debate, also currently performed on, there was very recently a paper on Nature, for example. And It is also proved, I mean, not proved, but there are some of the hypotheses of the theory find experimental evidences and that, of course, keep being a bit debated, okay? But here, our challenge here is to have a vision and have an inspiration. So, of course, please take all these I mean, with all the doubts that are due in science. But let us see how this theory, I'm sorry, I have, okay, here it is, how this theory is built up to describe the moment in which we get conscious. So what people call a being, so a conscious now. So how they got into this theory? So actually, Roger Penrose had a proposal that he discussed in his beautiful book, for example, in his beautiful book, The Emperor New Mind. And he had an idea of how consciousness could happen in our brain, but he had no idea of which could be the units where this could be involved. And Stuart Hameroff is an anesthesiologist, so he was studying for his research how microtubuli work, because they are known, actually their oscillations, so these vibrational modes that they have are thought to be related to how anesthetics work. In particular, anesthetic molecules are seen to bind via particular kind of electric forces to this kind of oscillations, and they hamper this kind of oscillations, and here is where consciousness faints away. So what is the point? So let's imagine to have these microtubuli in the dendrites. Microtubuli are not only in the dendrites, but also in the axons, are everywhere in the neurons. But they choose the dendrites because here the lattices are more suited to their idea and are more stable. So there are these oscillations that happen in terms of patterns in these hollow cylinders made of the tubulins. And so there is some time that is flowing, and during this time, these oscillations that are driven by the aromatic rings, they increase in coherence. So there is more and more matter that is involved. And if this is a quantum process, actually all this matter that is displaced, as Sabrina has discussed in her speech, this matter can follow, and in general, according to the rules of quantum mechanics, will follow different alternatives that are at the same time. So are different alternatives at the same time in a kind of superposition of alternatives. And this is what is depicted here. Because of this matter, of course, there is a deformation of space-time, because matter is a source of gravity force, of the force of gravity, and so there is the appearance of a displacement of space-time. And this keeps going until the difference in the energy that is involved in these space-time deformations, the difference in these gravitational energies keeps being reaches a critical value that for these several alternatives to become unstable, and for the full system to go into only one of these alternatives. And this is the time at which being, so consciousness, occur. So in this theory, in essence, what happens, this beam time is connected via this relation that is is nothing else than the Heisenberg uncertainty relation connecting time and this particular energy. So until this time is reached, the mind, according to the Hameroff-Penrose theory, works in algorithmic manner, in a quantum computing algorithmic manner. And after this, mind works, after conscious now, mind works in a non-computable manner. The inspiration here for Penrose was from the Gödel's theorem, by the way. Okay, so this is all what I think can be useful for inspiring your gamification, and it is clear from I think from this discussion that these quantum effects related to how mind works, they really bring together the most breathtaking mysteries that we have in our knowledge or non-knowledge. And so I made the choice of the Möbius, of this Möbius figure, by the way, representing infinity, just to tell that it is really a wonderful interconnection between what is in the quantum physics and what we still don't know about quantum physics, mainly whether it is a real phenomenon or a mathematical way of describing our everyday life world. So why we don't have a direct experience of quantum physics, so this conscious now, gravity and the universe, and of course mind and consciousness. And I think that in particular this a connection between quantum physics and mind is especially inspiring as a vision, because we really think as the mind working as a whole, right? And so having the possibility of quantum effects and of entanglement that can happen also at larger distance, it can really be very very interesting as a concept, and hopefully is something that can be understood in the next future. Okay, so many thanks for your attention, for sharing this exciting journey. I'd like to thank, of course, besides Sabrina and Concetta Morrone, I'd like to thank also Paavo Pilkkanen and Bert Kappen. With them, with Sabrina and them, we have been discussing about these matters, and also Andrea Ferrara, Caterina Foti, and Massimo Mannarelli, with whom I discussed these topics, and also our wonderful students, Gloria Ciconofri, Matteo Chiappini, and Silvia Trabucco, who, by the way, besides providing me with some suggestions about these slides, they will be mentors in your follow-on, in our follow-on Game Jam. So yeah, I ended up